The main concern about the Zika virus is that it has been linked to a rare neurological condition called microcephaly. Babies are born with abnormally small heads.
Our advice to pregnant women is that, if possible, that pregnant women should consider deferring travel to areas where Zika virus is currently circulating.
Authorities in Brazil have reported nearly 4,000 cases of microcephaly tied to the Zika virus. And now the World Health Organization says the Zika virus will likely spread throughout South, Central, and North America, with the exception of Chile in the south and Canada in the north, because the type of mosquito that spreads the virus isn't present in those two countries. In the Central American nation of El Salvador, health authorities have already reported more than 3,800 cases of the Zika virus.
Por eso es que estamos nosotros recomendando.
The Salvadoran Vice Minister of Health took the unusual step of recommending that women avoid getting pregnant for the next 2 years.
Podríamos esperar en Colombia.
Colombian Vice Minister of Health Fernando Ruiz says his country may get as many as 600 cases of microcephaly in the next couple of years. But Dr. Beth Bell with the Centers for Disease Control says it's important to remember that, with the exception of pregnant women, Zika is not dangerous for the population as a whole.
What we know right now is that for the vast majority of people, that is essentially people who are not pregnant, that Zika virus is a pretty mild infection, and actually the majority of people don't have any symptoms.
So far, 21 countries and territories in the Americas have reported cases of the virus, including Brazil, with as many as 1.5 million cases. Health authorities are especially concerned because the South American nation is hosting the Olympic Games this summer.
These efforts are on all fronts. They're trying to come up with a vaccine against Zika, and they're also trying to get more places that can do a test for Zika, because right now you have to send blood to the CDC to be tested, or maybe a handful of other places. And speaking of blood, take a look at these photos. This is Dr. Scott Weaver at the Galveston National Laboratory in Texas, and he is feeding mosquitoes sheep blood that has been spiked with Zika. He and his team will then study the mosquitoes, see how they digest it, see how quickly the mosquitoes themselves become infectious. And this is really important, Carol, because mosquitoes are what spread Zika virus. The mosquito bites an infected person and then turns around and bites another person, and then that person becomes infected. So studying these mosquitoes, as sort of yicky as it looks, is really key to controlling this virus.
So how do you stop those infected mosquitoes from coming into the United States?
Right, well, it's actually not so much that they're coming into the United States. That's not as much the issue. It's that infected people are coming into the United States from Brazil and other places, and then the mosquito bites those people and then bites someone else nearby. And so what you can do to stop that is that you try to catch as many infected people as you can, and then you try to control it that way. So, for example, if you know that someone has Zika, these mosquitoes love to live in houses, so you can spray that person's house. You can take those kinds of measures in order to try to slow the spread of the disease.
So just the last question, because it sounds very scary. How afraid should we be?
You know, Carol, every expert I talked to said that they really, truly do not think that Zika will be nearly as bad in this country, in the United States, as it has been in Brazil. And here's why. It's a lot hotter in Brazil, and these mosquitoes, they love the heat. And even in places like Texas and Florida, there's a lot of air conditioning. These mosquitoes do not like air conditioning. There are all sorts of other reasons. We're much better at mosquito control in the United States than they are in Brazil. This is what the experts tell me. And also, people tend to live further apart in the United States. It's not so densely populated. That means the mosquitoes have farther to go. I know that sounds odd. Of course, they can fly, but the farther apart the people are, the slower the spread of the disease. So they think, will it spread in this country? Probably. You probably will see some spread, but they think it will be very limited.
Thousands of infants in Brazil are being diagnosed with a devastating birth defect, and medical researchers believe it might be linked to a mosquito-borne virus. So what is this mysterious virus, and how do we stop it? Hi guys, Julia here for D News. Zika, a strange mosquito-borne virus, is sweeping through many Central and South American countries. Current estimates place the number of Zika cases over 1 million in Brazil alone. And in response to the outbreak, the CDC has implemented 2 new travel bans to an already large list for pregnant women, one on the United States Virgin Islands and the other on the Dominican Republic. The ban is for pregnant women specifically because since the epidemic started, the incidences of microcephaly, a devastating birth defect, have skyrocketed. Microcephaly is a condition where a baby is born with a small head. Because the head is so small in those born with the condition, the brain is small too, meaning it's underdeveloped, which can cause a whole range of other health issues, like cognitive deficits, seizures, feeding problems, vision problems, and hearing loss. Unfortunately, there's no cure for the condition, only treatments for its effects. Microcephaly is typically seen in rates of about 2 in 10,000 births, according to a study published in the journal Birth Defects Research. But nearly 4,000 cases have been reported in Brazil since October. That's nearly 26 times the normal rate. And researchers strongly suspect that the birth defect is linked to the Zika virus. Now, this epidemic seemed to have come out of nowhere. The mosquito that carries the virus was pretty much eradicated in Brazil in the 1950s. But as the decades wore on, it made its way back. Then, last year, reports of Zika in Brazil started popping up. It wasn't taken too seriously since its symptoms in adults are mild, just things like a fever or a rash. It wasn't until the rate of microcephaly shot up that the world started to take notice. Now, the battle against Zika is underway, and one that Brazil is badly losing, according to the health minister. And it is literally a battle. 220,000 members of the armed forces are going door to door to help in the current mosquito eradication efforts. But it's not just Brazil. Zika has been reported in 24 regions around the world, mostly in tropical areas. Each country is issuing warnings. Some seem extreme. For instance, the government of El Salvador told women to avoid pregnancy for 2 years. As for the Zika virus itself, there's no treatment, vaccine, or cure. The CDC says the best way to avoid the virus is to avoid mosquito bites. Now, experts say that a U.S. outbreak is unlikely to occur. They believe that most cases will happen to those who travel to Brazil and other affected countries. But this summer, tons of people will descend on Rio de Janeiro for the 2016 Games, which some experts are calling a perfect dissemination vehicle for Zika. If people travel to Brazil, get Zika from a mosquito bite, then return home and get bitten there, the Zika virus could transfer to the local mosquito population, which would mean that there is a potential for localized outbreaks in other parts of the world. Zika is just one of many viruses and diseases that mosquitoes carry. To find out why they're such good carriers of disease, check out this video right here. Most mosquitoes actually fight malaria with their immune responses to parasites. After a mosquito sucks up its bloody meal, a parotrophic matrix or barrier forms in between the bug's lining of their midgut and the blood. So what do you make of this recent outbreak? And what precautions would you take to avoid mosquito bites? Tell us down in the comments below. Don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons and keep coming back to D News so you don't miss a single episode.